Okay, thank you very much. So I've just been told that Orode Uduaghan will be joining us virtually. Welcome, Orode. So I'm hoping I will see her on the screen, on one of the screens. Okay.
Good morning.
Morning, Orode. Thanks for joining us. Orode is a commissioner for the girl child in Delta State. Welcome, Dr. Orode. It's good to have you here.
Thank
so
you.
like we said,
morning.
80 million of Nigerians. Please clap for Orode. Clap for her. Clap. Thank you so much, Orode. And thank you for technology. Thank God for technology. So 80 million, that's a huge number. More than 60% women. So we now know that gender disparity is not just about a cultural thing or societal issues, but it affects the economy in so many ways. So we have to have this discussion so we can know, look, what are we going to do to make sure that women are not so poorly affected by poverty, lack of access to health, lack of access to education, and all the things that make them suffer so much in Nigeria and really around the world. We have to make sure that these millions of women who are being restricted due to this disparity are able to live their dream and realize their untapped potential. That's why we're having this very important discussion today. And you will know that we have about equal number of men and women, but yet the disparity still exists, and it starts from the earliest stage. And I'll start with Ms. Orode, because, like I said, it starts at the very, very early stage when there's still a girl child, when they are still very young. Ms. Orode, dealing with the girl child, how can we ensure that, apart from education, because education is one of the important, apart from education, how can we ensure that there are things like mentoring and other things that will help our girl children thrive, help them be bold, help them rise up to the challenge and live above the poverty line? What are the things that we can do as a society to impact on the girl child, apart from education? Because that's one of the obvious ones, and I will allow you to talk about that later. But apart from education.
Okay, hi, good morning. I don't know if you can hear me.
Loud and clear.
Oh, fantastic. Good morning, everyone. It's awesome to be here this morning. You know how you said education is the obvious one? I would say yes, so we would leave education to the side. But I also think that one thing that we can do, or I would refer to Delta State, and one thing that I know that we're doing here to support girl child improvement or development is like what you've mentioned, things like mentoring and diversifying education. Education is the foundation, so we can't really run away from it. But what sort of education are we giving these girls to ensure that it's not the regular traditional method that they're growing up? So we're learning to diversify the sort of education that girls around us here in Delta State are getting. So we're big on things like vocational training, for example, right? We're big on community. We're big on networks. We're big on, like you mentioned, mentorship. So for us here, for instance, we've keyed into the Junior Achievement Program that sort of helps, they go into secondary schools and they help support girls with mentorship programs, teaching them about entrepreneurship at a very early age, skill acquisitions at very early ages. So we've sort of brought in all of these programs that can actually help girls develop from very early ages. But at the end of the day, it's still education, but then just diversifying the sort of education that girls are given, thinking outside of the box, putting them in communities. You cannot overemphasize community. You cannot overemphasize the importance of having strong communities that are like guides to these girls. So the people they look up to, the people they talk to, the people that actually hold their hands and help them move from point A to point B. So these are some of the things that we're doing here that I believe that in other places can also work for young girls, and, you know, ensuring that they are growing, you know, beyond how we were brought up, or, you know, girls in the past have been trained and brought up. And then we're also exposing them to a lot, right? There's this thing that I say to, I have a 12-year-old daughter, and I mean, the way she's growing up and the way I'm growing up are very two different things. So the exposure to so many things, the exposure to the world, the exposure to things that make them confident in themselves is also ways that we can help move these girls beyond the usual way that we've trained girls in the past in Nigeria particularly.
Thank you very much. Well said. Thank you, Orode. So we'll be coming to you, Ochania, straight away. We all know when it comes to gender disparity, one of the main issues is poor access to public health. How can we make sure that the rural poor, the unsophisticated woman, the unlearned woman, the woman who is struggling to eat every day, has access to the health care she needs and to the information, the vital health information that she needs?
Thank you so much for that question. So I will start by saying that we all would agree that health is not a privilege. Health is a right. For each and every one of us seated here, we deserve access to high-quality healthcare services. Where we see discrimination to access to healthcare services as well as sexual and reproductive health services, it undermines especially the woman's ability to take care of her family, her full participation in the economy and the society at large, right? For the rural poor, we must ensure that they are equipped with the right information. We must ensure that we have well-trained healthcare providers in those communities. We have issues around infrastructure. We must ensure we are taking infrastructure closer to these communities. Not just the infrastructure, a functional healthcare unit. We need to provide these communities with these things. Not just the infrastructure, they must have the drugs, they must have commodities, to be able to provide services in those communities. We would have to also institute demand generation activities so that the women and the men in these communities would also have the agency to take up services. If I bring that close to what we do in MSI Nigeria, we are leaders in providing family planning services in Nigeria, and we work very closely with the government of Nigeria. For us, our commitment is to leave no one behind, so we ensure that we push boundaries. We work in very rural communities that are beyond the reach of the health system. You go to these communities, you see women who are almost in tears when they hear that we are here to provide service, especially family planning service. A woman will break down and tell you, where were you when I had 3 children? Where were you when I had 4? Right now, she has 9 children, and that's when she's been able to access family planning services. We must do better to ensure that these services are accessible and affordable in these rural communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ochanya. Thank you, Dr. Ochanya. So still on you and still on the community, because we're talking about making sure those at that level, the unlearned, the rural poor, get this access in their communities. What role do we all have to play, from the traditional rulers, religious rulers, the public sector, private sector, even you and I? What role can we play to make sure that these disparities that we see in the gender space reduce and that poverty is alleviated among these women?
Thank you again. So you've asked around the traditional rulers. Some of these gender-based disparities are shrouded in culture and myths and beliefs. And over time, we have seen in our communities how critical traditional rulers are. They are influencers. We've seen them drive change at scale on different issues in our communities. We must ensure we're working with traditional rulers to improve male engagement, to drive community dialogue, to sensitize communities on the need to not drive these harmful social, cultural norms in our communities. For religious leaders, it's all clear to us, we're very religious in Nigeria, and they have a strong voice. But that does not take away the fact that we have some religious beliefs, right, that tend to deepen gender disparities. So we must work with this group. We must ensure that they are also adding their voice to drive down these disparities. If we take it further to the political sector, they are pretty much driving the policies. They coordinate governance. We need policies that would ensure that these disparities are reduced or eliminated. We have some already. How far have we implemented those policies? How much tracking is going on? So we would need to ensure that all of these existing policies are being tracked and monitored. And for policies that do not exist, we would want to see those policies in existence. For all of us, we should commit to be advocates against gender disparities in our homes, in our workplaces, in our communities, in our churches, whatever groups we find ourselves. And I know that countries that have succeeded in achieving 100% where there is no inequality when it comes to gender-based issues, all of these structures had to work together to ensure that they had that outcome.
Thank you. Very well said, Dr. Ochanya. So like she said, it's about everybody getting involved. It's not just about the NGOs or the government or the lawmakers, but you and I being part of the story to make sure that this gender disparity is improved, that the information is available, that access to education and everything is available to these women. And you mentioned policy, and from there I want to go to Toyin to talk about policy, because it's really one of the driving forces. We have so many laws available, and policy is really at the center of every issue. So what is the place of proper policy design? Do we have enough policies to deal with these issues? And how about implementation? What do we need to do to ensure that gender disparity is tackled really well, especially in the area of education and enlightenment dealing with these women? Thank you, Toyin.
Okay, thank you, Chioma. Good morning, everyone. I mean, it's no gainsaying saying that really, until we try and institutionalize all these things by way of law and policy, to use daily language, we're playing, you know. So it plays a great role in ensuring that not only those things that we talk about in forums like this are actually done, but that we ensure that for continuity and sustainability, we can continue to talk, you know, we can continue to then get traction. So in terms of what we can put in place to ensure that we tackle gender disparities, because we're looking at it really from what we have today and what we can do on a going forward, which is why I really appreciated the topic, is really about pushing forward. So firstly, I mean, we already identified that one of the things that women have to grapple with has to do with economic disparities. And so we need to see how we can ensure that we have legislations in place which tackle economic disparities. And that can include, you know, things like gender quotas for leadership. Yesterday we had a session on the political space. But beyond the political space, we're talking about every sector. And I'll use an example. Some of you may be aware that in the banking sector, there's a guideline by the central bank basically prescribing a quota for women directors on the boards of banks. And I'm sure also quite a number of people are aware that in the last couple of years, you've seen women managing directors emerge in the banking industry. But you can't really see it for the others and see what that has done. Very recently, the Nigerian Bar Association had an annual conference. The opening plenary session, and I was so very proud to see this, was the group of women managing directors of banks. That was the opening plenary at the Nigerian Bar Association annual conference. And it was a very enlightening and also very delightful for the women in the room, especially the young ones, to see them in positions of power. So really, until we then move and have this mandatory gender quotas in different spheres, we really will not be able to see the right level of traction that we require. Same thing for equal pay for equal work. We still have this whole disparity in relation to gender pay. Statistics that I saw recently for United Nations says that it's going to take globally 257 years for us to bridge the global pay. So we really need to have legislations also in place which prescribe, because you see, the point I was making that these things are not going to be done because we've been having rhetorics and conversations about these things. It's not new. I'm sure, as I said, that it's not new. But then how are we going to get traction? This is the conversation that we're having today. This is why I was saying that until we have, so we have Iceland. I understand that Iceland is one of the strongest countries that have legislations that actually prescribe. Not just prescribe, if you have 25 employees and more, you must actually justify that you have equal pay. You must present it. You must get a compliance certificate. That is how stringent they have. And then so many other countries have adopted this. And we've seen a correlation between having those legislations in place and economic prosperity for women. So you can see the direct impact of those legislations on the economic side. Then we also have anti-harassment laws. Now, the only one that really comes to mind that is targeted is the one that I think maybe some of us are familiar with, the ones on tertiary education. It's the law of 2021 prohibiting sexual harassment in tertiary establishments. Now, this is the only targeted, focused one. And why tertiary? Knee-jerk reaction. Of course, some people saw the videos and about what was happening in our universities. And really good that we took a proactive approach, that the government did this and actually passed this. Of course, implementation is a different thing, but it is there. It is a pretty good law. It doesn't have any statutory limitation. They can report it anytime. It doesn't say that in 1 year or in 2 years. It's a very good law, but it's the reach, the breadth. Why only tertiary when we know that this is applicable across? So when we have that, and in fact, I'm starting to look at statistics on what that is doing. It's actually having an effect. And we're looking at probably seeing how studies will show. So imagine if it cuts across, again, mandating formal sectors, having anti-sexual harassment policies in place to ensure that women are able to do well in the environments in which they find themselves. You see, until those things are made mandatory, we find that you have non-compliance levels to be pretty high. So those are some of the issues that we face. And then maybe also in relation to parental leave, also how women are discriminated against in terms of maternity leave. And in fact, the world is even pushing that it should be gender blind, that we need to have those sort of laws that actually recognize that men can contribute in relation to such matters and encourage them to take that space. But then the women that actually are in that space, also encouraging them and not penalizing them. Because we have situations where, again, as a result of that, because we're talking about equity, I mean, it is not her fault that her biological makeup is in such a way that she had to undertake that process. But then why does she also have to penalize? Why does she have to suffer from lack of promotion? Again, until we actually prescribe penalties or legislations that cover these things, that ensure that the woman is able to, thrive even in those situations, we find that again is non-compliance levels are high. And then maybe the last thing I want to do is maybe access to finance and economic opportunities as well. So the same thing, again, we have all these policies, we have all these maybe even credit schemes that support businesses. I saw a study by Faith Foundation where they talked about MSMEs and NMSEs, including the nanos, and they showed that there are more women entrepreneurs, but yet, less women are accessing finance. So again, looking at policies on a policy level, we need to look at why are women not accessing it? Those policies, if they're not looked with the gender lens, you have a nice policy, and I saw on TV recently where they were talking about how there's so much funds available to women, but they're not accessing them. It's there, they've created it. There was a time when we were talking about make provision, but now there's provision, but still access is a problem. So again, looking at policies holistically, looking at it, especially as finance, if you ask MSMEs, what's the greatest challenge that you have? You'll find that out of 100 will say is finance. So access to finance is so critical, but then we have to design it in such a way that those policies, the SMEDANs, the BOIs, they are able to then curate this to suit women, actually, so that then they can also access it. And maybe I'll stop at this for now.
So,
yes.
Thank you so much. So much to unpack. So many policies need to be made. Why? Because there's gender disparity in every sector, in every sphere. And I like that you mentioned access to finance, because I'm going to come to Dr. Toby now to talk about intellectual property rights. Because one of the downsides is that when women are not able to monetize their innovations, they lose out big time, and the cycle of poverty continues. How can we get this poverty cycle to be broken and alleviate poverty? How can we get women to understand that there's money to be made from their innovations, from their creations, and from things that they actually create as women?
Thank you very much, Chioma, and thanks again to the organizers. Good morning, everyone. I think it's such a critical aspect, and when I was thinking about the topic and just how thinking about poverty eradication, one of the key things that we know drives wealth is property, ownership, the rights that people have over the things that they own, whether it's a vehicle, it's land, it's real estate. That's really how we see wealth grow in most societies, and this is as far back as human society has existed. And I think when we talk about intellectual property, we're again speaking about forms of property. And it's a system that rewards these intangible forms of property. So moving away from the ones that you can really see, but we're looking now at the ones that, things like your creativity, your innovation, it's the creations of the mind. And statistics might want to show us, when you look at, for example, registered patents, it might want to show you that women are not very innovative. You might see like 17% of women named on international patent applications. And we know that that's not the truth. So what really is happening? Is it that women are not filing patents? Is it that women are not innovating? Let's look at even the creative scene. We might think about musicians, we might think about authors. You can't say that women are not fantastic creatives, you see. But then there's still a disparity in how much women are getting from the system. And when we're talking, I started with the lens of property, because I want you to also understand that when we're talking about things like innovation and creativity, it's a form of property that can be owned, that people make money from, and it transforms lives. And so I think it's very important to be able to look at why is it, or what exactly is happening that women are not also being able to tap fully into their creation. And I started with the question, is it that women are not creative? Is it that women are not innovative? I don't think so. I think that evidence will suggest to us otherwise. Rather, what's happening is, I think there's a lot of societal barriers that women are facing. I'm so glad that the commissioner spoke about what they're doing in Edo State. And it's clear that targeting young ladies, women from the ground, early stage, and helping people to see that the ideas they own are valuable. These are things that change societies, and that they can actually earn profit and reward from it. They can own it. A tragedy that we've seen in the past in the IP system, for example, is that a lot of female innovators were not allowed to name themselves on the patents. And so it's either their husbands or somebody else, a male figure, that will be the one able to put in their name. And so again, you see that even though the woman could come up with the innovation, it's given to someone else in the aspect of commercialization. And so I think that one of the work that we have been doing as an organization is to try and close this gender gap. And so we have what we call the IP Gender Action Plan. And what we've been doing is in 3 ways trying to tackle that. First is we try to work closer with governments to be able to say, how are you supporting women through policies? I mean, my dear sister has spoken, Toyin has spoken extensively about the policy, the role of policies. But how are we infusing this gender lens in our policies? She rightly said there's a clear correlation between policies and the actual implementation on the ground. And so if you haven't set out an action plan at the policy level or the legislative level, then we're still just walking in cycles. And so we're working very closely with governments, at the patent offices, especially around IP, to say, how are we trying to close that gender gap? Something we see in the IP lens, for example, that is a lot of women, especially in countries like Nigeria, the innovation and the creativity that they express, you see it also in rural societies. And so at the rural level, you can have traditional knowledge that is passed from generation to generation. You have women telling stories to their children, stories about the healing properties of plants, stories about how things can transform them, about seeds, and then you find that down the line, bigger companies are able to come and access this knowledge about the healing properties of plants, create products, market them at expensive rates, and these women are never acknowledged or recognized. And I think even at that level, we recently had a law just passed around traditional knowledge and genetic resources, and it's really trying to also say that even at the rural levels, the contribution that women make needs to be recognized. And so we also need to look at community protocols and how women in such, at the rural levels, are recognized for their contributions. I think the second thing that the action plan does is it tries to conduct more research. And so we have been organizing a number of research initiatives, and we even have one coming up in November. Again, the call is still out, but it's just for researchers, economists who wish to engage in this conversation to be able to look at where are the IP gaps and how can we close that. And of course, the final one is direct empowerment. And I think one of the things we do is to now have projects and programs that are directly trying to impact and speak to the women on the ground. And in that lens, we've had a number of community initiatives. So we're working, for example, through what we call the Women Entrepreneurship Program to target women, even in rural communities, who have this kind of traditional knowledge. And we're saying, how can you even commercialize? How can you protect this knowledge? And how can you ensure that not just you, but your families, your communities actually are benefiting from that? And so maybe I can pause there. Happy to speak a bit more, but I think it's very important.
Can we clap for WIPO? Because they're doing a whole lot, and it's quite commendable. Just think of it. Your auntie in the village might be able to get something for that herb that she's using to heal people, that has been in your family for decades. Because what we see nowadays is that you see something that you've been using for hundreds of years, and somebody will, go abroad, patent it, and say it's a new thing. Maybe it's, chewing stick. I saw it on Amazon the other day. It was like we've been using that for centuries. So it's good that we're actually being proactive and reaching those people in the grassroots. It's really commendable. So I'm going to go back to the Commissioner. Orode, are you with us?
I'm here.
Awesome.
I'm here.
So I like that everybody has spoken about education and the girl child, but how early it starts. And when we look at our out-of-school numbers, Nigeria has the highest number. It's really, really awful. When you think about it, about 18 million children at primary and secondary school level are out of school. And out of that 18 million, over 60% are young girls. What can education do? How can education, and I want to just hammer on education, even though we've all spoken about it in different ways. How can it be used to challenge this gender norm so that women are able to come out? Because the truth is that, like Dr. Moody said, even the confidence to say, I did this is my creation. Because as a woman, you speak out, you're seen as an angry woman, or you're being too forward. But as a man, you're seen as bold. So what can we do to make sure that the girl child, through education, understands that she can speak for what she believes in and for what she has done, and she should take ownership for the things that she has done, and so many other things that will help reduce this gender disparity that we talk about and improve the levels, and reduce the levels of poverty.
Thank you. So I believe that education is very important, right? And it does help with mindset reorientation, sensitization. But I would like to say that I think that the one thing that is a gap or a problem or a challenge, for lack of a better word, is the amount of representation that they get to see or experience. I'll give you an example. I got into politics when I was 31, for instance. And I remember someone saying to me at the time, a mentor saying to me at the time, Orode, you need to be very conscious about who is carrying your file into the room, right? So basically, who is hand-holding you and ensuring that you as a young woman coming into politics, you sort of succeed. Because we can reorient them, we can open their mindsets, but then there are still barriers that are there that makes it almost impossible for all of these things that we're doing, projects, programs, policies, whatever it is that we're putting in place to be implemented. So I think we need to really look at how women are represented in different areas across Nigeria. In Delta States is I don't know if I'm supposed to say this out loud, but the representation for women in politics, for instance, is very, very low. In Nigeria as a whole, the representation is very, very low. So even if we do programs, we do projects, we do all of these things, and we put structures in place to get them implemented, we need people who can actually push for these things to be implemented. And if you have 100 men and 1 woman in the decision-making room, it's almost impossible for anything to happen. So we can't do a lot around education. We can orient their minds, which we're doing here. We can open up, expose them to so many things, make sure that they are no out-of-school children. We have a program here that is called Delta Marshal. So they make sure they go around communities, those girls or boys who are, hawking in the streets in the morning, they make sure they get back to school. There are so many programs in place. But then at the end of the day, when it comes to girls, if we're narrowing it to the gender, it's how many people are in those decision-making rooms that ensures that all of these programs, all of these projects, all of these things that we're doing or working hard to do actually gets implemented and are sustained. So yeah, I think we really need to circle back around the amount of representation that women get, particularly in decision-making rooms, or else everything that we're working hard to do, and we are promoting the girl child. I'm also in charge of humanitarian affairs here and women empowerment. All of these things that we're doing, I'm able to push so much because I know the pains that women face in my state. So I can go to the room and I can ensure that things happen. But then if that's not present in so many other areas, we'll continue to see failures. We'll continue to see things not moving the way we want them to move. So yes, I think that's yeah.
That's key. That's so key. Thank you so much, Orode, because truly, who are the people making the decisions? At the end of the day, we do all we need to do, attend all these conferences, hear the information, but who are the policymakers? Who are the people who are wielding the pens and making the things happen? And with that, I'm going to come back again to Toyin once more, because we need to really double down on who, on female representation, as she said. And we have the laws. I was in Kenya recently, and I saw that most of the posters for the last election, there were so many women. And I wondered, why are we not seeing that in Nigeria? Is there anything that legally we can do, or we can, that can help increase this number, so that we can get women to actually sit behind and make these laws and policies that will help reduce this gender disparity that we speak about so often? Just 1 minute, Toyin. Okay.
Okay. So the question around having more women in decision making is still the same thing. If I had to speak, and I will speak as a lawyer and also as a woman who feels that we really should be concerned about sustainability, it will still be embedding it in the law. And so that's why we're talking about constitutional review. Until we have our quotas, 35% affirmation, until we have that in the law, I know there's a lot of efforts. There was a panel discussion about that yesterday, which was discussed exhaustively. Essentially, again, galvanizing action, asking the women in the room who didn't hear that we need to support in ensuring that this is domesticated in our laws through the Constitution. So constitutional reviews going on, support it, and then when it comes out for public hearing, speak out, also in supporting it, both men and women. There are economic reasons why it is important for us to be there. We've talked about it extensively as well. There's so many reasons. And then what is costing to us, really, that's the most important thing. What is costing to us globally and locally in Nigeria, the economic things of not having the women in taking those decisions is actually affecting our economy. There's so much loss in terms of contributions to GDP as a result of that. If that is not convincing, I don't know anything else that will be convincing. The fact that we could do well as a nation, we could do much better as a nation, not as just as women, no, both men and women will do better when the economy does better, and that the economy can only do better when the women are also in those rooms where those decisions are being taken, which affects women directly, women and girls, and which are not being done in such a way as to facilitate empowerment of women across, the diverse industries. Looking at, just so many. I was also looking at women farmers recently and how underserved, underprovided, so they get to do all this menial farming relation works, in the packing and the sorting, and then the men are the ones that actually have access to finance and then able to buy the tractors and to do, essentially the heavy farming parts. So disproportionately, see how that affects women. So essentially, again, boiling down to policy and laws with a gender lens, gender mainstreaming, and ensuring that they're fit for purpose.
Thank you. And just some small housekeeping. The PIC, the host of this summit, would appreciate your feedback. You can use the QR code, which is everywhere. You can go to the feedback stand, where the research assistants can support you, or use the digital screens in the foyer and give your feedback. It will be really appreciated. We'll take questions in a bit, but I still want to go back to Dr. Moody and talk still about, you asked a question and you gave the answer. Is it that women are not creative? Of course we are creative. We are the doyens of creation, so we are creative. But something is missing. Some people are not getting the information. I like what WIPO is doing to fill in that gap. What else can be done? What else needs to be done so that we can ensure that women at every level ensure that they get credit for their own ideas? Is there a reporting system? Is there something they can do to make sure that, look, if I created something, if I had that idea, I do get the credit for it?
Thank you very much, Chioma. I think I agree. I'll just maybe summarize two suggestions. One is I think that there's a need to absolutely have the women themselves educated, empowered. And I think that is really what most of our conversations have been here today. I think that women, as we grow, we need to be envisioning a society where the young girls, as they move, as they grow, they have a great sense of confidence and awareness in what they create. We don't think it's just a women problem, to be honest, especially around IP. We still think that there are some communities that generally the population is not so much aware that they can own and fully tap into the wealth that's attached to their creations and innovations. And so, but I think that especially around sciences, and we have targeted programs for women in science, in STEM, just because we think that there's a gap there as well, where a lot of ladies...
Thank you. Thank you for reading my mind. I was going to say gender inclusion, which is all about this program. And I'm so happy that the commissioners are all here. We are going to really be engaging them at the state levels for AWITA, Association of Women in Trade and Agriculture.
Can I go on? Okay.
And all my state coordinators are here, so as you are coming down from that stage, they are going to be holding you, sirs. However, my concern has been on inclusion.
Sorry about that. It's from the next hall.
All that have been spoken by everybody. No one has mentioned the cluster or the bit that is upon.
Okay, thank you. This round of
distribution.
This one is. Hello? Okay. Thank you. Sorry, so I'll just quickly wrap up. So I was just saying that I think that a lot more needs to be done, especially for the growing child, to make sure that they themselves are aware. Now, on the other hand, I feel that we need to be looking also at collaborations. I think there's a strong role, and I'm glad that we've talked about, having greater representation in the rooms. But I also think there's a need to have strong allies. It may not be women all the time, but okay, I think
Okay.
Okay, hello. All right, so I think just the other point I was trying to make is that I think it's important to have strong allies, associations, people who can also and who also share the same vision. And I think in that sense, it's important that as we target education to the young girls, to women generally, more broadly speaking, I think it's also important that we're also channeling that kind of education to the rest of the society so that people also see themselves as responsible. And the way we've also talked about it in the IP frame is that when the creativity of women or the innovation of women is hidden, then it's not just a loss for women, it's a loss for society. And so seeing it from that lens is that we lose out as a society when the innovation and these hidden gems of women that they bring to the world are not properly harnessed and brought out. So we as a society collectively are losing, and as such, we should see it as a collective responsibility.
Thank you very much, Dr. Moody. It is a collective responsibility. Everybody has a part to play, and of course the he's have to be there for the she's as well, and for those who are excluded. Talking about exclusion, you mentioned financial inclusion briefly, Toyin. I want you to just talk about it briefly, because it's something that is so important. When we're talking about poverty alleviation and things that exacerbate poverty, and we're talking about gender disparity, financial inclusion cannot be ignored. It's one of the main solutions. Can you just briefly just talk on that, and then we'll go to, we'll take some questions, because we have a few.
Okay, so there's been a lot of talk about financial inclusion. I think, again, looking at the room, I'm sure that we've had several projects that have been targeted about financial inclusion, and I keep referring back to our topic, is about how we're tackling all these inequalities and how we're ensuring we can move forward. So benefits of financial inclusion, we know that you can then, be able to have an account, you can be able to be empowered, women will have agency, they will be able to, be able to make form better decisions. But one of the issues around this is the fact that it's been fragmented. So you can find all the initiatives around financial inclusion around different stakeholders. But then more recently this year, the government, under the office of the Vice President of Nigeria, then is coordinating the whole economic and financial inclusion agenda for the government. So for the first time, all the stakeholders, when we're talking about in terms of the banks, we're talking about CBN, we're talking about several, and including the ones that are focused on mobile money, mobile banking, they're all in the room. This is being coordinated by the technical advisor to the president on financial inclusion. And I was very privileged to attend one of the first technical workshop where everybody was in the room. And for me, this is how we can really move forward. It's fragmented. We haven't been able to make a lot of traction. In fact, my firm, Banwo and Ighodalo, is currently supporting in terms of the legal framework for ensuring that we can push on this financial inclusion. So what I think, what I expect to come, and this is also being led by Lagos Business School, by the way, and essentially what I expect to see, and this is the collaboration that Dr. Moody spoke about, because indeed working in silos hasn't worked. We still have those issues around financial inclusion. The women are not having access. They can't even access, even mobile money that's supposed to work better than the traditional banking methods. The figures are still very low. So my own expectation is that this initiative, which led to the project ASO Accord signing in April of this year, will bring about better coordination and collaboration around all the actors who are tasked and who are focused on financial inclusion. And so in the coming months, we expect to see better traction in ensuring that women are more included in financial services.
Thank you so much, Toyin. That's fun. Please clap for all the panelists. They've been, it's not easy to sit up here and reel out figures and all the stuff that has been happening to deal with these issues. And I would like to say that when it comes to gender disparity and how it exacerbates poverty, it's not all doom and gloom. Some things have been able to thrive and work and function beautifully, especially in the public health space. Can you just touch on that briefly, Ochanya? What has been able to work and thrive in the public health space despite all these issues?
So in the public health space, we've made some progress. We've had services, in some scale, driven towards the rural and the poor communities. Like I mentioned when I first spoke, if I bring it home to my organization, MSI Nigeria Reproductive Choices, if I just look at the work that the mobile outreach teams are doing on a daily basis, it's amazing. We have these teams who go out into these very rural communities, drive demand, and are able to provide services to these communities. These are communities that are beyond the health system. We've had some policies that, that have been put together and I would say have been implemented to certain levels, but I know that as we continue to put on this gender lens, we'll continue to make progress. The health outcome is very closely related to these gender-based disparities. It is so clear. If a woman is hungry and cannot take care of herself or her family, that cycle continues. She would have a daughter who might get married at 12, and that poverty cycle will continue. My other colleagues have spoken, education is so key, even when it comes to public health. Having the right information, having the right agency. If I bring it home to public health, there are some conversations that as a nation, we shy away from. But we all must be vocal when it comes to these disparities. That's the way we will make the change. We must hear men talking about these issues, not just women talking about these issues. We must hear critical influencers, the government, the traditional leaders, the religious leaders, add their voice to amplify, be advocates against these gender-based disparities. Thank you so much.
So much, Doctor. Please clap for Dr. Achanya. Clap for this beautiful panel. There's so much to be said, but the truth is that we don't have all the time in the world. So we're going to just take a couple of questions from the audience or from those online. We can read the questions out. Does anyone have a question?
Yes.
So okay?
Yeah. Okay, let's take from here first.
Okay, so we'll take one from the front.
We also have a question online.
Okay, so let's take the person in the front first, then we'll do the online person.
Good morning. My question is to Dr. Achanya. Is family planning free?
Okay.
Thank you so much for that lovely question. Family planning, to a large extent, is free. The outreach teams that I spoke about provide free family planning services. That is through MSI Nigeria. In the public sector, to a large extent, family planning is free. What clients, and that is dependent on the PHC, they would collect money for iodine or cotton wool, but to a large extent is free. The national policy, right, has it that family planning should be free. And that's why I spoke about the need for us to track the implementation and monitor the implementation of these policies. In fact, for disabled people everywhere in the nation, people living with disability, family planning should be free and accessible whenever they need it. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll play with the...
Sorry, just one question.
Please, it's still on this family planning. We were talking about the institutionalization of the law. Maybe we should make the law so that the family should be completely free. Because somebody that doesn't have money, I'll go to family planning and say, Madam Patient, bring money for iodine, bring for jig, bring for hand gloves, bring for this thing. So we should separate it. If I'm going to family planning, I shouldn't go and pay for folder because I'm there. Family unit should be separated from the facility. Let me just go to family planning and get my services. That's my suggestion.
Thank you very much. That is a very good suggestion. Please clap. Thank you so much. And we'll take the online question.
Okay.
We'll take the online question, and then we'll take the other question so we can take them all at once.
Okay, so I think this question is directed to Dr. Moody. And she's saying, in addressing gender disparity, how can collaboration between government, local businesses, and international organizations, both small and large, be enhanced to create sustainable solutions for increasing female representation across different industry? Then on collaboration, she said, can you share some successful examples of such partnership and how can they be scaled to drive broader impact?
Okay, before he answers, let's take the last question.
Thank you very much, panelists. I think when you were talking, you laid the emphasis on education, knowledge sharing, and on both sides. But we have a largely illiterate population. A lot of our conversations are very high level. The people that we need to serve are not in the room. We do have, yes, NGOs, partnerships and co that go and do clusters in some of these places. It's not enough. How do you get the representatives on board?
Very good question.
Thank you. Because they are the ones who have direct access with these people. They speak the language. Me and you are here speaking high-level English. They don't know it. So you get my question, Abi?
Yes, fantastic question. And I'll have Dr. Orode Uduaghan answer that. Before she answers, Dr. Moody, can you answer your question?
All right, thank you very much for that question, and I hope I got it clearly, but I think it's really about how government, local businesses, and international organizations can work together to support and advance this agenda that we're talking about, and some examples. So I was just going to highlight maybe just 2 quick examples from what we've been doing at WIPO. We have had, in the Nigeria office, for example, we've been able to organize what we call this IP and Business Women's Summit. And what we do is we bring the government stakeholders together. Earlier this year, we were able to work also with WIMBIZ, which is a very large association representing women. And we had that opportunity to dialogue. We created a platform, and coming out from that process, we're very glad to see the kind of collaborations that really came through. A lot of women asking questions, but beyond that, the community that was formed, I think gave an example of what we're doing. Now, we've also been able to collaborate with other international organizations. So we have a program we're running with the World Trade Organization. We have one we're doing with the International Trade Center, which is the She Trades initiative. We also have one with the UN Trade and Development, that's UNCTAD, on E-Trade for Women initiative, also supporting local women in their places to be able to export and access foreign markets with their programs. Now, in this context, maybe the last thing I'll just say is that we've also been able to make available courses free of charge. This is distance learning courses, e-learning courses. We understand that there are some women that will not be able to access those ones, but we've been able to do this free of charge to women who are seeking to gain more knowledge and gain empowerment. The latest tool that we have is a digital box that will be able to get into rural communities where there is no internet facility, translated courses in local languages that women, again, on the ground will be able to use. So I'm just trying to highlight some examples, but I do agree with the questionnaire that collaboration is key, because no matter what we do, at the end, it's the government that will drive these things, and at the same time, it's the people that will hold the government accountable. Yeah.
Thank you very much for answering that question. Thank you. And Dr. Orode, are you there?
I am.
Is Orode there to answer her question? Okay, please go ahead.
Hear me? Oh, okay. So I think it sort of ties into what Dr. Moody. Sorry, there's an echo somewhere. Okay. I think it ties into what Dr. Moody has said, again, around collaboration and how those things can get trickled down to the lowest of the lowest people. So I will just give an example of what we do here and how we ensure that these things actually get trickled down. So we are working, one program I'll give an example with, we're working with Enterprise Development Center and the MasterCard Foundation at the moment to support girls across the state, 18 to 35, with entrepreneurship training, skill acquisition training, and whatnot. So what we've tried to do, or what we've done to make sure that, ownership is taken by the people who are supposed to own this project, is we ensure that every house member, so in Delta State, we have 25 local government areas, and every local government has a house member. In some local governments is 2, because there are 2 constituencies in that local government. So as a house member, it's your duty and your responsibility to own that project in your local government area, right? In collaboration with the local government chairman. And then also we were able to partner with EDC to make sure that the learning materials are as simple as possible. So even the LMI learning that you can use your USSD code to learn on in a smart or a non-smartphone is translated in the pidgin language so that people who are not able to understand English can learn. But I think it goes back to the ownership. So what we do is we ensure that the representative of that LGA owns the program across the state. So it's your duty to make sure that the program is happening in your local government area. It's your duty to make sure that people are participating in the program. And then at the end of the day, there's a central reporting system, there's central data gathering back to the ministry. But for every program that we want to make sure goes down, and it's not just for my ministry, also for things like health. I know with the Ministry of Health here as well, if they want to make sure that it goes to the rural area, they take the representative of that local government area who has to work in turn with the local government chairman and works in turn with the councillors across the different wards. So we take our program all the way to the ward level across the different LGAs to ensure that people actually are getting the benefits of these projects and programs that we're going. And it's your responsibility as the representative of that LG. I mean, if you don't do it, then of course, when it comes back to our reporting, you have nothing to report. We know where the problem is coming from. So that's what we've done. Those are some of the structures that we've managed to put in place here in Delta State. I don't know about anywhere else, but here in Delta State, it's compulsory. If we're doing programs, you, the LGA rep, has to take ownership of that program, working hand in hand with the ministry, with the local government chairman, with the councillors of the ward to make sure that the program gets to the very rural communities. And then in the way the program is also being shared, how it's given to these people has to be in our local language as well, or in Pidgin, which is, you know, vast for everyone to understand. So those are some of the things we put in place here in Delta.
Thank you very much, Orode Uduaghan. Thank you for that. And the truth is that this message needs to be heard far and wide. Like the questionnaire said simply, a lot of the women that we need to get access to are not in this room, but they will rely on us to get the message to them. By radio, by whatever means, by word of mouth, we need to make sure that we are getting the message across. Because when a woman is treated equally, it's better for the nation, it's better for all of us. It improves the economic outlook, it makes the nation healthier, happier, and wealthier. Thank you for being part of this panel. I'm sure you've enjoyed our discussion. We've learned a lot, I've learned a lot. And we look forward to pushing gender parity across board, across the nation, and improving our economic outlook. Thank you so much. We'll take our pictures now, the panel.